Hello, BookTube. A few days ago, I put out a call for things that I could do on this channel that you might like to see. Since you're all under stress and we're all in quarantine and we're all at home, if there's anything I can do to help, is there a thing I can do to help, a kind of video I can make that maybe you want to see more of? And I got a lot of great responses to that. I am still getting a lot of great responses to that. And of course, feel free to send me your response at any time. My email will be on this video. But one of the things that came up over and over again, of course, you all want more starter kits and you all want top 10 lists and stuff like that. And those are fun to do anyway. But one of the things that came up over and over again was people saying, you always do mail hauls. I used to get tons and tons of books in the mail. That has stopped, and I don't know if it'll ever restart. But many people responded by saying, you've shown us so many books in the mail, and you always have something to say about their general topic or their author's past books or whatever. But what we'd really like is to know what you thought of those particular books when you got around to reading them. And I heard that from so many people that I started to think, and I realized that back then, I don't know if it's going to stay true. I imagine it would have to, just for professional reasons. But back then, for those first 4 years of this channel, those mail hauls were also TBRs. They were gradually and then increasingly up until the end of 2019. They shouldered out more and more of the backlist or miscellaneous stuff that I would find at used bookstores until they became by far the bulk of what I was reading was new releases. So that those mail hauls were TBRs, and when I thought about doing this regular feature, I am now going to do this. I put out the call for you, rather than for me to go and look at which videos do I want to revisit. I put out the call for you to do that, for you to send me links to my own videos of mail hauls where you are particularly interested in knowing what I thought about the books in that mail haul. And once again, you have responded. I have been getting tons and tons of those suggestions, and I want more. Feel free to do that when you have a minute. Go back into my enormous back catalog, thousands of videos. But one of the things that surprised me about those suggestions was how many of them are coming from people who aren't connected to BookTube. Friends of mine, in many cases, fellow book critics, who watch my videos. In many cases, I did not know that, and who are curious to know about what I thought about backlists. I just automatically assumed that the last people in the world who would be interested would be people who already opinionize about books for a living or a side gig, and yet that has not been the case. So I am going to institute a new feature on this channel. Since those mail hauls were my TBRs, we're going to do throwback reviews in miniature. It won't be at any great length, although I will link to any actual great length review that I wrote for any of these books. So we're going to do throwback reviews of my earlier TBR videos. We're going to do TBR TBRs, to be read throwback reviews. And we're going to start with, I have a backlog already, and I'm not complaining about that at all. I'm very happy that I have a backlog, so feel free to increase that backlog. I should say not just mail hauls. If you want me to revisit a book of any kind that you've seen on this channel, if that is a kind of video that will relieve your cabin fever, then you go right ahead and suggest it. We have a lot of backlists to work through. But the first one that I want to do to kick this off, I think I will do this on Thursdays for Throwback Thursday, but I wanted to try it, sort of a pilot program here on the weekend. So the first one I'm going to do is from May 3rd, 2016, and I will leave a link to the video. This was suggested by someone who is not part of BookTube, not a commentator on BookTube, not a BookTube channel, and who does not I shouldn't say does not want to be identified, but it feels a little odd. All of you who are on BookTube will remember how odd it felt at first to just sort of put yourself out there for all of these people that you don't know. I mean, I felt a twinge of that myself. I don't feel anything like that anymore. I feel nothing along those lines whatsoever. But people who have never been on camera, God forbid, No, this person did not want me to really go into great detail about her identity, but a book critic and an old friend, and who picked. Apparently, this video has been stuck in her craw for quite some time, wanting to know what my reactions were to some of these things. She also said that she thought it would just be interesting to see me revisit these things, and I think a lot of you felt the same way. I think that's where this idea came from. So we're going to go through these. There aren't many. This mail haul included, first of all, 2 Norton Critical editions. I'm ashamed to say I don't have a prop here. Norton Critical editions, a lot of you will know what they are. They're paperbacks. They're for schools. They give you the front part of the book is the text, the canonical text, with footnotes and an introduction, and then the back half of the volume is critical apparatus, contemporary reviews, contemporary historical or fictional sources that the author drew from, and that the back half of the book's critical apparatus extends forward in time. So let's say you have Moby Dick. Then the back half material will start off with famous accounts of whales sinking the ships of their killers that Herman Melville might have read or might have excerpted. It will the back half will then give you initial reviews of Moby Dick in the UK and in America, and then it will move forward. Critical essays will move forward in time to the present day. Norton Critical editions are wonderful. They're just wonderful. They are. If you want to learn about a book, a canonical text that you don't know that much about, The Art of War or The Prince or Sons and Lovers or whatever it is, if you want to learn about that work, well, you've got a perfectly annotated version of the book, and then a whole bunch of critical conversations to help you put it in context in the back of the same volume. And if you love a book already, the Canterbury Tales or the Decameron or whatever, if you love a book already, then oh my God, the selections in the back of Norton Critical editions are just going to be candy, just pure candy. And in this mail haul for May 3rd of 2016, I got 2 Norton Critical editions. I wondered at first why my old friend was picking this video. Why, of all things? Because I don't think any of the books are particularly of interest to her. She did actually hint at a reason, and I wonder if a lot of you would even agree with this. She said that this was the first video where I didn't seem subdued, where I was talking something like my normal face-to-face vocal register, something close to that. And she's told me before that when she watched my very earliest YouTube videos, she thought, well, you're being polite and soft-spoken. And part of that, I know, at the time I had 2 very old dogs who were frail. They were, both of them, about to become mortally ill for different things. I got their diagnoses on different days of the same week. It was not the best week in the world. And as a result, I was a little more subdued. I knew perfectly well what was coming to me. I knew that I was about to shift into caretaker mode, and that the purely happy days of dog ownership, the ones that aren't overshadowed by any kind of mortality, that aren't overshadowed by the fact that this species ages 5 times faster than mine, I knew that those days were about to end, and that I was about to go into caretaker mode. And I, of course, like any dog owner, hoped that my caretaker years would last a long time. It's part of the picture, and it's not all negative. The very end of the caretaker years, when you reach the end of the caretaker years, then the dogs stop being sick and they start dying. And that is purely negative. But the caretaker years are not purely negative. And maybe she has a point. Maybe I was being a little subdued. I would like to chalk it up to just being uncomfortable on camera until I got more the sense that there were just people, that you're just people listening, and that it doesn't matter what the machinery in between is. But anyway, I got 2 Norton Criticals in that email. I got a Norton Critical of Candide and a Norton Critical of Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. And I read and loved them both, but I don't think I kept either one of them. I know this is heresy, but I'm not a big fan of Candide. And I'm also not a big fan of Jude the Obscure. I'm not a huge fan of Thomas Hardy just in general. I love his prose, but his plots and his characters are absurd, and his plots are so bad. And I'm sorry, I am not an artsy-fartsy reader. If you don't do the basics well, then I'm not going to be 100% concerned with how canonical you are, and I'm also not going to allow the sheer beauty of your prose to paper over those other deficiencies. I'm just not going to do it for myself. So in both cases, although I love getting Norton Critical editions in the mail, neither one of those was an actual bullseye. So I don't think I have either one of them anymore. But I remember loving them, especially loving the critical stuff for Candide. The critical selection, well, it struck me as very different from the previous Norton Critical Candide and very good. And another book I got in, it's not going to go on forever, I promise. Another book I got in that haul was The Apache Wars by Paul Andrew Hutton, which was his very nitty-gritty, very personality-driven military history of the wars that the U.S. government fought against the Apache Nation. And it was brilliant. Just fantastic. I worried at first. I worried just a little when I was poking into it that the author has a dramatis personae and a very catchy introduction, a very catchy sort of table-setting preface, and I thought, okay, so you're going to go after readability here, and you know that your general reader doesn't know anything about this subject, so you're going to cut corners to do that, and I was totally wrong. That very initial reaction was totally wrong. This is historically serious, measured work that just happens to be fantastically done. That's I wasn't sorry to be wrong. That's a combination I absolutely love. It was just terrific. Then the next one, another book in this same haul, was Die of Shame by Mark Billingham. I think I've received 3 Mark Billingham novels since then, or 2. He's a contemporary thriller writer. He's very, very good. He really knows how to pace a story. And Die of Shame, I really, really liked. If I remember correctly, I had a problem with one of the main characters who would be, I guess, in Billingham's calculation, a bad guy. That, if I remember correctly, wasn't convincing at all. Didn't just seem to fall apart, or rather, seemed to be sort of slapped together, and then those pieces naturally didn't hang together. And then another book that I got in that mail haul was a fiction debut. It was Night of the Animals by Bill Brune, which is set in London in 2052, where a man is hearing voices in his head. He always has been there, and he thinks that he is in some sort of mystic communication with the animals in the London Zoo, and wants to free them in order to prepare the groundwork for the coming of the Lord of all animals. And as a debut, it does nothing wrong. It's big and atmospheric. It's totally confident. It was as a debut, it struck me as the kind of book that has probably been percolating the author for a very long time. Notes and pieces and notebooks, and it struck me as the type of novel that the author has been walking around with the whole time. So the author might have a job interview, and he's hurrying to go to that, but he sees 2 starlings on a phone pole and lodges it away in his mind as part of the book. The book that is just building over time. Now, I might be wrong about that. He might have jotted all this stuff down in 2 seconds, but it struck me that way. And debut novels like that I love because they are lovingly cared for. The author it's a labor of love, but not in a blind way. When an author, if this is that kind of debut, when an author is like that, writes a book like that, a portmanteau book that they've just been adding lovingly to forever, they care more about that debut than the more by-the-numbers workshop-y thing where the author just wants to get a debut out into the world and has a big book down the line that they do care about, but it's not the debut. Something like A City on Fire by Garth Riss Halberd, or this book, Night of the Animals, which I don't think I've ever seen in paperback. And I don't have my hardcover anymore. I wish I did, because I'd love to reread it. Those kinds of debuts I tend to love because they are everything but the kitchen sink, and they tend to mean more to the author, which means that the author is going to care more about the finished product. But they also worry me, because usually a big everything but the kitchen sink debut novel like that means you won't hear from this author again, or you'll hear from them very seldom, or their second book will be an enormous disappointment. And I don't know. I don't know if that'll be the case. I didn't actually check ahead of time to see if Bill Brune has written anything else. I'm pretty sure that I have not got anything else from him. But that was another thing in that mail haul. And then the last thing for this particular TBR TBR was Catherine of Aragon, The True Queen by Alison Weir. The first in her fictional project of writing big, fat historical novels about each of the queens of King Henry VIII. Now, she's not the first historical novelist to do that. I don't agree with that at all, as I've made clear on this channel from time to time. I know that it's outre and that it's extremely melodramatic, but I don't agree with pop historical fiction or pop history's decision to reduce Henry VIII to the wives. I just don't agree with that at all. Yes, okay, he serially married in a very operatic way, but he did a lot of other things too, bad and good things, important things that I wouldn't mind so much a fictional project like The Queens of Henry VIII if we were getting as many other books on the on other things other than the wives. But we're not, and that's just the world we live in. And Catherine of Aragon, of course, is about Henry's first queen, his true queen, hence the title. The Catherine of Aragon was brought over from Spain, the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, by Henry VII in order to marry Henry's heir, Prince Arthur. And they did. And months later, Arthur died, suddenly, unexpectedly, of a disease. And the flatly ridiculous fiction was put forward that Arthur and Catherine had never consummated their marriage, not in all the time that they'd been together, not despite the fact that all the courtiers thought they had. That the idea being that if they'd never consummated their marriage, then Catherine was free to marry Henry VII's next heir, his spare, Prince Henry, who became Prince of Wales, who became Henry VIII. Catherine was free to marry him because she had not had carnal relations with his brother. It's absolutely ridiculous. And Arthur, no matter what his drawbacks may have been, unlike his brother Henry, he was a bit of an imbecile, but he was a tutor. And I know we've all been raised on the mythology of the Virgin Queen, but show me a tutor anywhere connected with the family in any way who could get married to a beautiful Spanish princess and remain unconsummated for months. There is no such tutor. There never was. It's a silly story. I don't know why historians take it so seriously, but nevertheless, Henry did marry Catherine. And they were happily married for a long time, but they had no living heirs. All of Catherine's children were stillborn, or born and died very soon afterwards. There's been all sorts of medical speculation about what kind of a medical syndrome she might have had or might have contracted from Henry that would have caused that to happen, but one way or another, eventually, Henry started to think about his own mortality. He was helped in that regard by a persistent health problem in one of his legs that gave him pain and often bad odors and often an odorous discharge, and also by an incident that some historians put, in my opinion, way too little weight on, where he was hurled from his horse and was face down in a muck puddle for a long time. When he was pulled out of that puddle, he was unconscious, and most of the people at the moment that he was pulled out of the puddle thought he was dead. And even once it was realized that he was alive, he was insensate for a long time. And the people, especially his Privy Council, were starting to think, oh my God, what is going to happen here? He has no heir. Are we going to have to go beating the fields for someone in the Pole family to be King of England? And then Henry started to revive. And after that incident and incidents like that and the problem with his leg, he started to think about his own mortality, and suddenly that started to be the ultimate sin laid at the doorstep of his wife, Catherine, who was beloved by the people. She was an anointed queen. She was beloved by the people, but she wasn't giving him an heir. And suddenly that became, not suddenly, but over the course of a couple of years, that became a ruling obsession. It caused him to put her aside. It caused him to divorce her, or want to divorce her. And Alison Weir does a very dutiful job of this whole story. You can't write a historical novel that's critical of Catherine of Aragon. You can't do it. As far as I know, no one's ever done that. You really can't do that. I would imagine that if you can't do that under normal circumstances, you certainly can't do that in virtual signaling 21st century. One way or another, it wasn't. Catherine of Aragon, the True Queen, was not exciting, but it was very good, and I reviewed it. I reviewed it for the Christian Science Monitor, and as far as I can tell, it's the only one of these books that I reviewed, that I ended up reviewing. I'm hoping that doesn't become a trend. I've had people, not the old friend who requested this particular date, but other old friends of mine, and a few BookTube viewers, I've had people point out to me, it just off the top of my head, without doing a scientific analysis, it looks like you don't review a lot of books. You get a lot of books and you write a lot of reviews. I should point that out in my own defense. Far more book reviews per person than any other book reviewer in the world, but nowhere near a book review for every book. Nowhere near that. Oh, do we have a guest? Oh, we do. Ooh. 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 Here's the baby. You're not sick. You're not ailing. You're not. You're a solid little bean. It's freezing cold here in Boston today, and it's dark as twilight, and there is snow on the ground. And it's sleeting all day long. So somebody is not getting her exercise. Actually, neither one of us is getting exercise. But anyway, I will leave a link to I reviewed Catherine of Aragon for the Christian Science Monitor. I'll leave a link down below. And that is it. That is the mail haul, the first of our TBR TBRs for May 3rd, 2016. And what I want to do for these is, once I'm done talking about them, reflecting on them, I want to rank them. Not all the ranks, but just number one. So for every one of these TBR TBRs, when I'm done talking about them all, I will tell you the best book in the batch. Because although I didn't review all of these books, I read all of them, and the one that stands out here is the Apache Wars. That is the bean of the bunch for this time around, for our inaugural TBR TBR. The Apache Wars is amazing. Now, I don't know if it ever came out in paperback. No idea what its afterlife was. I suppose to do these things, I should probably check in on afterlives of books and authors and whatnot. But if you're an American history fan, it's absolutely necessary. It's an amazing, amazing book. And also thrillingly written. So, you won't be slogging through just for the importance of the data. So there you go. That is our first TBR TBR. And I have plenty more to do, but I want to hear more from you. If you pick a video and send me the link, that makes it easier for me than I have very little idea how to dig around in my back catalog. But that's what we're going to do, and I think now that I've tried this, I think that it works fairly well. So I will adjourn these to Thursdays, and we'll just do one of these on Thursdays for the rest of 2020, or until the germacological all clear sounds. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I have plenty more to talk to you about, so I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.